Von Herman has been a tenured professor at the Center for Mathematics and Computer Sciences in Amsterdam since 1988. His research has involved computer graphics, information visualization, and various graphics-related ISO standardization activities and software developments. He joined the World Wide Web Consortium in 2001 and is currently their digital publishing activity lead.
So why am I here from the W3C? That's in a way the question. And what is the origin of the work that we are doing together with IDPF and others on digital publishing? If I put aside the browsers, the fact is that digital publishing and EPUB and even Kindle is the biggest user of the W3C technologies. Somebody already said the word, although not in a very positive sense, that an ebook is a canned website. I think you said that, anyway. But it is true. I mean, inside, it's all W3C technologies. And it's not only the books, as I already said before. Scholarly publishing is on the web all the way. The fact that they also publish things in PDF is a secondary issue. Practically all journals now have a web presence. Magazines have a web presence, etc. So publishing industry is a huge user of this technology. And of course, this community has very high demands. And we all heard quite a lot of things today on the high quality typesetting and other demands. And today, publishing brings in rich media, interaction, all kinds of other things. So yes, it's an important part. The fact of the matter is, however, that the publishing industry has been absolutely passive in terms of the development of the technology. In general, what happened is, I don't want to say you guys, but the publishing industry was sitting and waiting for the web technologies to deliver. And sorry to say, guys, this is not the way it works. There are working groups. In those working groups, you have the big browser vendors. They set the pace, they set the priorities based on the requirements they know about. If the publishing industry does not say what they need, well, they won't be heard. So there is a potential synergy between web developers and the publishing industry which is missing. And that has a bunch of consequences and some of the deficiencies from the publisher's point of view that we can find in HTML, in CSS, in JavaScript APIs, you name it. So in 2012, we started a series of workshops with IDPF to see where we can take it from there. And Kat is here. Hello, Kat. You were one of the persons who made it possible. Thank again. Because she was one of the persons who really got the first workshop starting. So we did that. It was a series of workshops in New York, in Paris, in Tokyo, and we ended up setting up a separate activity at W3C, essentially in 2013, which is still running with a separate interest group. And it's now an interest group that has weekly teleconferences and usually 2 face-to-face meetings a year. We will have one in May in New York City. This is the formal text. You don't even have to read that. These slides are actually on the web. I will give you the address at the end. This is the formal charter. I rather move on what it really means. What it really means is that experts who are familiar with the digital publishing technology, they get together and they try to address and they try to identify those issues that are a problem from that community's point of view. These issues, we try to collect them, to write that down in notes. We try to connect the working groups that are working in these specific technologies, CSN and others, to say, guys, there is a big community that needs that, and hopefully they listen. Actually, what happens is that some people in the working group are now also active from the publishing side. They are also active, let's say, in the CSS working group, and that's very important. So there is a collaboration, a kind of a synergy that we try to put in place. There is a link to the website. As I said, you can follow it up from the web with all kinds of details which are boring, and I don't want to get here. So who does all the work? We know that IDPF has been writing specs for more than 15 years now, and they use W3C as a standard basis. EPUB 3 has gone way beyond what previous versions did, and that's really great. The IG highlights the issues for the Open Web Platform, as we call it, for W3C, and then we hope the W3C working group, well, they will update the spec and they reflect the requirements. And I will give some examples. At the moment, we have 5 what we call task forces in the group that look at various aspects, and I will not go into all the details because it's too much. I will just highlight some. I don't remember when we touched upon annotations, there was a separate task force on annotation. There's one on layout and styling. The first one is led by a guy from Stanford University Library, Rob Sanderson. Dave Kramer is maybe a person that some of you know from Hachette, who leads the layout and styling. Bill Kasdorf and Madi Solomon on metadata, Tzvia on content and markup, Deborah Kaplan Charles on accessibility, and Peter Kreisberger, who is a Madjax person, leads the STEM forces. So just a few examples. We collected a separate document on annotation use cases. Now, actually, this is very interesting because this activity is something that also happened and had some interest from the website, the web browser side. There were a number of people who wanted to be able to annotate web browser pages. And therefore, we actually set up, sometimes last summer, a separate working group that is now developing a standard for web annotation. And the web annotation in this case is a general term, but it includes also annotation facilities for publishing. This is something that happens. There was a teleconference about 2 hours ago. I wasn't there, but it was there. And it's actually interesting because this is the first working group that has been set up with the 2 communities together. So that's a good sign. Pagination and layout, we are creating a document. There was already 2 drafts, and there is a third one coming probably sometime before May, which looks at the requirements for Latin text layout and pagination, Latin being the character set. And there are a number of things that are there. You should read the document. What's more interesting is that some of these issues are now picked up by the CSS working group. So there is a CSS inline layout module, which is actually co-edited by Dave Kramer, which tries to put into CSS the requirements to be able to do these things. For example, drop caps and a bunch of other things. I said that it's on Latin text because the core of the group, well, is speaking and reading mainly Latin character text. But there were a separate group at W3C, independently actually of this work, who did a similar text for Japanese, very complex things. I tried to read through it, and I must admit I didn't understand a large portion of it. And they are also working on a similar text for Chinese and for Hangul, and maybe for various Indian things. So there's a work going on trying to collect this information, and this is fed back to the CSS work. Independently of this, there is a new work that has started about 2 months ago in the CSS working group. At the moment, they call it the Houdini project, if you see it somewhere on the web. And it gives an interface to JavaScript from what the CSS renderer does. And why it's important? Because it would give a standard way, hopefully, to control and to get information on pagination, something that currently for different reading systems is a major thing to do. And as far as I hear from people, it's all various types of hacking without any commonalities, and hopefully that will change. Metadata, we have an interview of a number of experts in this. We published the metadata task force report, which actually ended up by saying that, well, what W3C offers as technologies in this area is okay. We don't really identify anything missing. The problems are immense because identifiers are others, but that's not W3C's job to do it. So it's more like the community should use whatever the technology makes possible, but other than that, there is nothing else to do. Content and markup, I think we had some reference to similar work, is adding information to the text which goes beyond what HTML provides. Today, there is this EPUB : type. On long term, that will not work. It will not work because it is not HTML5 compatible, and if this community wants to use the tools that are out there in JavaScript, then HTML5 is the future. So there is something that has to be changed there, and the luck is that there is another group working in accessibility which has similar requirements. So at the moment, there is a joint task force led by Tzviya on our side and some others from the accessibility side to try to combine these two technologies and to reuse those for the purposes of publishing. And accessibility, we have a whole set of documents that W3C has provided on various types of accessibility guidelines, and there's a review of those documents to see whether are there issues and requirements from this community that those guidelines do not cover. It's an open question, I don't have the answer, but that's a work which is going on. And finally, STEM, there is a list of people that we have contacted, and we are doing an interview series right now as we speak to try to find what the pain points are. We know about MathML, obviously. We know that MathML's implementation level is not really what we would like to, but there might be other issues. For example, at the moment, W3C has not done any work, any significant work, on standardization of 3D on the web. Maybe there will be a strong requirements to do something like that because the STEM community needs that, or chemical markup, or these kind of things. These are all out there, we don't know. So that's what's happening now. The question is, what's next? And what's next is there is a document that we call EPUB Web, and we try to get the DPUB, the Intergress group, working on the planning and development of this. So EPUB Web, what the hell is that? It's a joint vision that IDPF people and W3C people have discussed, and which is now out there as a kind of a white paper on those URIs. And you can actually put in issues on the issues list. It's on GitHub at any time, so it's a document that is there for everyone to grab. Instead of doing this, let me just run a very short screencast. This is a book that was produced by Wiley. But apart from the fact that it's used paging, if you look at what's happening here, it could just as be a web page. There is no real difference apart from the fact that it is paginated. And it's only paginated because the reader that I used here doesn't have the continuous display mode. On the iPad, I could have done that. It does all kinds of interaction. It's teaching Java programming. It shows that I have got it wrong, so it gives me the next steps. I can start over the whole thing. I can look at answers, hide answers, all these things that are absolutely standard on the web. You see it all the time. There is nothing surprising about it. And this is an educational book. So this is where we go. So the vision that we have is that the portable documents, as we might call it, are first-class citizens on the web. They are not a separate entity like ebooks are or EPUB documents are. They are really the same thing. And the separation between what's online as a web document, as a portable document, should diminish to zero. It means that a content that is authored essentially for offline use could be brought into the web and read as a web page, and there should be no difference. That the content that is authored for web use should be put into an offline version if I need it, and that's the same thing. And this should be done doable very quickly, very smoothly, with an easy interaction without too much problems. So publishers can choose to target either one or both, and the user can choose either one or both. And the essential features like linking out, like annotating, cross-references, etc., should work exactly the same way on the two things. So why would I do that? So on the desktop, I may read this book. It's the PhD of one of our colleagues at W3C. I may want to read it as a web page because I want to go out and follow the links to the web. I may want to use all the useful plugins that my browser can provide me. I can create annotation, whatever. Sometimes I may need all the power of the computer, 3D or whatever, but in some other cases I want to use the text when I'm on the beach. Well, this is a juridical text, so I won't read that on the beach, but you see what I mean. And it should be the same book, whether it's offline or online. But this is not the only example. As I said before, we are not talking only about books. Scholarly publishing today includes more and more data sets, audio, video. But on the other hand, I may want to read it offline because, let's say, I review it while I'm on the train. So I need that duality for scholarly articles as well. Big companies like IBM or Renault or others, they have an enormous amount of documentation. We already know about a year ago, IBM has announced that the internal documentation will use EPUB in the future. But in fact, what they need is obviously in some cases being offline. And when I am up in the air, I don't want to have network problems. But it's the same documents, whether it's online or offline, and I want the online possibilities to update those documents quickly. Archiving and presentation of websites. If you talk to any librarian or archivist, they will say it's an immense problem. And something like an EPUB-like document is an ideal way to do that. And educational materials. I mean, you saw an example here for the book content, whether this is now a book, an application, a testing service, a data holder, all this the same thing. And all this should be smooth, whether it's offline or online. So how do we get to this point technically? Obviously, there is a need for a very strong cooperation between the two communities. This is the only way this can happen. And we have to identify the technical challenges. They are not a huge amount. Some of them are complicated, but they are not a huge amount. We are much closer to it than we think, simply because EPUB 3 has paved the way of bringing this technology very close. Probably at the moment, and that's my private feeling, the packaging format is probably the most complicated issue. The browser world currently is looking at ways to a standard packaging format for browsers. The fact of packaging up a lot of things, a big JavaScript library in one block that they want to carry over the HTTP network is something that they realize they need, and they work on it. This is very close to what a book is. And there is a window of opportunity right now, and this window of opportunity will be open for the coming 6-7 months, as we can see now, where anything that happens with packaging here would work with the publishing industry and vice versa. At the moment, the discussions are on the basic formats, whether it's zip or something else. I don't want to go into the technical details, but that's a question to which we need an answer. The current EPUB 3 structure may have to be adapted to web browsers. As I said, HTML5 on longer term is a must. Probably using JSON instead of XML for some of the configuration file is something that come up because browsers, whether we like it or not, but we have to accept it, are not fond of XML, and that's a British understatement. So that's something that we have to take into account. Identification, it's a huge problem in general, regardless of this work. We know that libraries and other institutions have problems with identification of books. What is a web identifier of a specific book? But of course, if we want this merge to happen, then this question becomes even more, difficult in a sense, but more urgent as well. But also we have to identify into the document. Whether CFI works or does not work for this purpose, we don't know. This is something that we have to find out. We have to use all the WebME methods to carry metadata, whether that's RDFA, whether it's microdata, or whatever, JSON-LD, that's, these are technical questions. But these documents can carry and should carry metadata with them much more than they do before. Styling, pagination should be there. Security access control, I do not necessarily think only of the D word here, but issues like the way access is controlled on the web with user and password is a totally different philosophy than we have in portable and documents in general. So this is something that we have to reconcile. The same way as presentation control is different. Traditionally, an ebook reader will give you possibilities to adapt the outlook in a much more open way and much more possibilities than on a browser. You can change the background color, you can change the font size, something that you cannot do on a browser. So there is a reconciliation of philosophies, if you like, that is necessary. So these are some of the technical issues that have to be addressed. In fact, if you look at those, like the pagination or the styling, these are already on the program of the interest group. So we are already working on it, but the interest group should work on identifying the additional issues and problems and technical challenges to better understand what's happening. And that will be the guiding principle for the group's work. Something that I have to emphasize, this is primarily a long-term vision. We are not talking about let's throw away EPUB 3 or EPUB 3.1 if it happens this year. And as I emphasized, many of the new features are actually already in 3.1. So we had a discussion at a meeting 2 weeks ago in Phoenix, and many of the things that are considered for 3.1, like, for example, should we already allow HTML5, is already on the agenda today. So this is more a long-term vision than anything else. But as a long-term vision, I think it's very important. I think that's about what I can say. We will have a face-to-face meeting at the Hachette building in New York in May, right after the IDPF conference. And well, at the IDPF conference, I hope that we will have further discussion on all this. There are a bunch of references here that you might be interested about. The last line here gives you the URL of this presentation. It's an HTML presentation. I am absolutely ashamed, but I had to produce a PDF because I tried to put these into an EPUB, but there is a complicated JavaScript behind it, and it miserably failed. So, hey, this is one of the challenges. We should be able to do that. And, of course, you can contact any of us at those email addresses. And thank you very much. Questions?
How can we get involved?
Okay. The question was, how can you get involved? Here you are. So first of all, this white paper, as I said, is there. And you can submit any issues as you want on that issue list. The second, of course, is we would like as many people from the community to join the interest group because, surprise, surprise, we have manpower issues. So we would need new people to come in from small companies and big companies. I don't want to hide the fact that this usually means, unless you are a standalone expert or something, it usually means that your institution should join W3C, which has financial consequences. That's the way these things work. But we would really like much more people in the group than we have today, so join. But as a starting, this is just there.
Is there any thought given, I don't know if this is a recommendation or a question, to considerations of whether the device has power? You spoke about tablets and e-readers might have a more limited form of a book for when they're offline. But what about when they're plugged in or not? Is there any thought? Has any thought been given in terms of what the? Because basically some books drain battery a lot with advanced media. Is there any
Yes.
thought for a media query, sort of our, am I plugged in?
So, you see, this is where I didn't go into too much details of the mutual advantages for the communities that all this bring. The web world obviously is very aware of that. So W3C has a whole series of development of various APIs which look at things like media capabilities and etc. So with smart scripts, you can adapt whatever happens depending on the information that you get from the devices, exactly for that purpose. Now, the digital publishing community has two choices. One is to reinvent the wheel for itself. The other is to try to use as much as possible what other people have developed at W3C or are developing at W3C. And this is why this kind of fusion of the two on long term is really, in my view at least, important for the digital publishing community as well. This is one of the good examples. There are obviously a bunch of others. The development of various types of APIs for JavaScript at W3C is a huge work. I must admit that I have given up keeping track of all the various APIs that they have. But they are developing it because they want to use the web, obviously, on the mobile. We have to follow, we have to exploit that because it's there, or it will be there.
As the standards change, what is being done or what can be done to help get the reading system makers on board with the spec?
Well, some of the reading systems are, well, some of the companies behind the reading systems are on board. Of course, we don't have a view of what's happening inside. So in the group, we have representatives of Apple, of Google, of, well, Rakuten, so, and Kobo. Whether they really keep attention and or not, and what happens behind the walls of the companies, I can't say. Bluefire, it seems that they will be part of the group as well. So, you know, we have them. It's very difficult for us to influence the policies happening, let's say, at Apple. Not only for us. Thank you very much.